Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is finally here, the last day of the LEC, and we have an interesting match to cover here. We have playoff placed Rogue taking on the rising Schalke here in a very interesting matchup. If Rogue win this match, they get a chance at top 4, and we possibly have tiebreakers. If they lose, they're locked in 6th and have to face either Mad or Misfits in the 5th versus 6th matchup. But do we see a Rogue win or do we see a Schalke upset? Only time will tell as we break down this amazing game. DJ, cue up my favourite track. So let's kick off this draft. We're going to start with Rogue's bands here. Obviously they go with Gragas, Ornn and Ziggs. And Schalke ban out Senna, Syndra and Kalista. Now, Gragas, big AP jungle threat, big boy, very hard to deal with. Ornn, tanky threat, kind of a blue side ban normally, or red side predominantly. Surprised Rogue ban it themselves. And Ziggs has been that sort of champion that has been played by Schalke in their loss to G2. It looked fairly decent, has a lot of lane harass early game, and also can do a lot of damage to turrets and get an early gold lead by destroying them. As for Schalke's bans, fairly standard. Senna, very strong, obviously still has some power left in it on patch 10.6, even if it did get slight tweaks to its soul gainage and the amount of damage they give you. Syndra, just a very good mid laner pick, everyone uses her normally if she's available. And Kalista is one of them champions that obviously was picked by G2 yesterday, and it was very dominant in that top side match. And obviously, if you watched it, Odoamne didn't get to play League on that Jace, so a very, very nice ban there for Schalke. So our first round of picks arise. We'll start with Rogue picking up Aphelios. Obviously is that top tier bot lane champion. Has a lot of situational play. Obviously needs to be very, very protective. Doesn't have that much mobility and as a whole can be dove quite easily. As a response from Schalke, they lock in their own bot lane here. They go with the Misfortune and the Nautilus MF bullet time combined with Nautilus CC is very, very good and very, very hard to deal with throughout the entirety of the game. In response, Rogue go for their jungler and their bot laner so that they have a full bot lane and aren't facing bot lane bans like supports, as well as a jungle pick in the Pantheon. Pantheon, very, very decent as a global that can get him to lanes quickly and counter gank with ease. Has some CC of his own. Has a shield that obviously can deal with bullet time. And that's a similar thing with Braum, who has his own little shield that you can play with. As for the response from Schalke, they pick up their own jungler here. Sejuani, very good jungler, very bulky, and what I've noticed so far is Schalke's team comp has a lot of tankiness built into it and can do a lot of work. Whether or not we see it is very, very hard to tell. Now with bot lane and jungle picks locked in, we're going to see bans towards the top side of the map as well as the mid side. We see Renekton and GP banned out by Rogue, and we see Echo and LeBlanc banned out by Schalke. Now obviously these picks and bans are fairly standard in towards what can be picked. Obviously there's still Aatroxes available. There's another bulky boy, say like a Scion if you want to go Mimi. And there's other picks like that. As for mid lane, you've still got Zoe, you've still got Orianna, champs like that. So there is still counter picks and options for these laners, whether or not we actually see them. And yeah, fairly standard bans. Now it's time to lock in the entire draft with our last pick phase. We start with an Azir pickup here for Schalke. Fairly safe mid laner that has a lot of scaling into late game. One of them hyper carry threats, obviously with them sand soldiers, if you get enough attack speed, they're shredding through health bars. In response to it, we see Rogue picking up Irelia as a top lane pick and Corki. Corki's been predominant in the LEC in recent weeks, having a lot of poke, can just sustain through the Azir harassment through the entire game. It's taking you back to like Season 7, where it was literally just Corki and Azirs in mid lane. Irelia obviously shows that it's probably going top side map, has a lot of threat and kind of good in that sort of sense. And here's the big kicker. The response from Schalke is a pretty much counter pick to the Irelia. Odoamne is getting to play League today, boys and girls. He picks up Jax. Very good champion. Obviously, you put that counter-strike down. Look at the entire Rogue team. There's no real AP threat, so you're basically avoiding so much poke from this Rogue lineup. Obviously, you just build a bit of armor into this team on Schalke's side, and they're kind of good for the entire game and kind of counteract the Rogue lineup considerably. So this game got off to an interesting start. We're going to go in at first blood, where Schalke's top laner Odoamne is trading with Finn in that top side map, like top laners usually do, and essentially Finn goes in for another one of these trades to try and even out what damage he's taken to kind of force Odoamne to recall, and Finn get basically free CS in that top side to get a pushing wave, and obviously try and freeze it in a decent spot for himself. However, and this is a huge however, Sejuani is kind of hiding in the top brush on the riverside and is kind of waiting for Finn to go in because he expects Finn's aggression, because Finn is one of them players who'll look to aggress, and once Finn goes in, it's just an easy chase in, stun him up and kill him, because he's that low, he just gets popped immediately. And it is a very, very nicely done engage, and that gold is put onto Jax, which is vital for how this game turns out. Now, the fighting wasn't done in that top side of the map, as yet again we see another rinse and repeat dive, as Irelia had to expend teleport to get back to lane, and this is trying to force out the flash from her. And she immediately goes in aggressive, trying to fight again, and immediately gets hit into a 2v1, and she dies just before killing Sedge, or just after killing Sedge, and she then dies over to Jax, and Jax is now 1-0-1 with blue buff, meaning he's pretty strong at this stage of the game. He's got an early game lead, which obviously means a lot more pressure is going to be exerted into the late game, and honestly he can just be a nuisance and kind of just stand up to Finn any sort of fight or skirmish that comes through, and essentially it's a free lane for him at this stage in the game. 5 minutes on from that last fight, we see a Rift Herald play set up here. Obviously, Schalke are trying to get the Rift Heralds to get some early goal lead and obviously pressurize the map even more, probably through their topside map, and they obviously set up the Herald quite nicely. However, where they're fighting is not ideal for their Azir, for their MF, as they engage onto the Braum, pull him in with the Nautilus, and then bullet time comes flying down. Now the issue here for them is, obviously they're still fighting onto the Herald, killing it off and actually picking it up, while the damage dealers for Schalke are stood in direct contention to essentially Corki, who's just able to fire in a blood damage and burst him out, and essentially what happens is Dreams gets left for dead. All while this is happening, in the bot side of the map, Finn and Odoamne are essentially 1v1ing, and what happens is Jax wins yet again, basically ballooning that lead even more, making it even harder for anyone on Rogue to come contest him, and essentially it's now an even more free lane for the Jax, who's probably gonna get some Rift Herald gold to kind of get him to that late game power spike Jax that everyone knows and loves as he whacks a turret. Now, Rogue didn't want to just keel over and give the game over to a Jax, and they actually decide to make a very, very aggressive play here, with Braum harassing behind turret and Aphelios just taking as many turrets as he can in this top side of the map. Inspired makes the roam up top side, and uses his Grand Starfall aggressively to dive the the bot laners on Schalke's side. Nautilus gets dove immediately by the combo from the Pantheon, and then Braum just jumps on top of him, and then the CC chain coming out of Rogue kills the Nautilus. Now, in response to this, we see Schalke dropping Rift Herald bot side, giving Jax over the full turret first blood gold, and also then a fight in the mid lane where Finn gets dove on and killed, trading the kills for a 1-for-1, as well as the turret trade being a 2-for-1 in favour of Schalke, with both bot lane turrets dying and only one in their top side of the map. Now, in my notes here, I have one thing written down, and it's called Jax, and it's the same play that's happened through the entirety of the game. Essentially, it's Sedge and Jax diving Finn in that top side, killing him off instantly, and no real response coming out of Rogue, bar say a TP in from Larson. Obviously, it's the same thing that's happened, rinse and repeat, from First Blood essentially, and it's happened multiple times. This top 2 synergy has worked out considerably well for Schalke here, that they're just dominating Finn. Spoiler alert, it happens again. Yet again we see Sejuani roam down to this bot side map, and Finn's overstepped again. He's gone past the horizontal river line where he should not be going, and he tries to trade, getting as much CS as possible against the Jax and Sedge. Obviously, Sedge just needs to hit one auto, and then Jax essentially can kill the Aurelia. It stops her dashing around, and yeah, basically she gets nullified completely in this team fight. Now, Rogue still are trying to make plays here, and they trade with the Rift Herald, the mid lane turret, over to themselves, getting a bit of gold into their pockets. And what ends up happening? Well, Jax is already behind them. He walks up, Counter-Strike inactive, pop, there goes a kill for MF. Now it's the time for Braum to die. Jax gets another kill, and essentially what we see here is a turret trade for 2 kills over to Schalke, and then another fight or kick off in a few minutes as we see Schalke go into towards Baron, and with this Baron take, it kind of forces Rogue's hand here to try and contest it, and what we end up seeing is another fight. Down goes Corki, and guess who flashes forward? It's Jax. Jax is now chasing down Finn on his Aurelia. You know how this ends. It's happened the entire game. He gets another 2 kills here, taking himself up to a triple kill in this team fight. Pantheon's already in the pit a bit too early, and he's dead, giving over a kill to Azir, and then Baron. Obviously, this is very, very huge, as it kind of means that Rogue are now kind of out of it. They've been out of it for a while, because Finn's just been feeding, and essentially now the Baron siege begins. No one can really contest a Jax split push, so he's probably just going to sit off in that side lane as the first turret falls, and we do end up seeing in a few minutes a pretty decent fight to end out the game. With 4 men hanging around mid, Schalke is sieging, trying to end the game and get the inhib here in the mid lane. And what we end up seeing is we see Braum try and clear out wards, Sedge comes forward, Pantheon comes forward, Braum ult hits, bullet time comes down, and that essentially means that all the ultimates are down on Rogue's side. So what happens? Braum gets killed, because Jackson just walk up, Counter-Strike, lock him up, and then walk up to the inhib and kind of get this for free. The mid lane inhib goes down as well, and that essentially does mean we're in that point in the game where Rogue essentially have to do or die fight in order to survive. Literally about a minute later, we see Azir kind of going forward, trying to check vision, while Corki has package. Now, with package, Corki is able to chase him down and burn him up quite quickly, and this is the part where Rogue know they have stayed too long and have to try and run away. And Aurelia tries backing, but already she gets dove on by the Sedge and the MF, and down goes Aurelia immediately. Braum gets chased down by Nautilus and Jax, and then it's the last kill chase. Corki versus Jax. Who wins? Jax. He just flashes forward. With that Blade of the Ruin King being procced, obviously means that he's going in, and he's going ham. He chases down 1. He chases down 2. And he's on his 3rd chase down here onto the Pantheon, which he doesn't actually get, but instead he's going to sit in the base, kill off the minions, and Schalke are going to take the game here. And you can kind of tell how I'm going to summarize this game as this last team fight comes through. They're trying to kill out the Jax here, who's just gone in stasis and makes it out alive. And now what we end up seeing is the turrets fall, and the game going over to Schalke null Fear as the chase down, and the perfect game is ruined for Jax. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's overview time, and oh boy, I've got a lot to say about this game. As a whole, it was very interesting to see the picks coming out here, and yes, it didn't matter too much. Obviously, Schalke were eliminated technically from playoffs, and it really only mattered to Rogue if they won, because that meant they had a chance at top 4, and they weren't in this do or die 5th, 6th matchup. Now, obviously, if I was Rogue, I'd be killing myself over how I drafted this team comp, as you allowed 2 big bulky boys in the Sejuani and the Nautilus to go over for free to Schalke. Instead, you chose Aphelios, who you've got plenty of other options. I don't really like first pick Aphelios, really. Yeah, he does have a lot of damage, but he is kind of weak. I honestly feel first pick support or jungle is slightly better in this current meta, as you're guaranteeing yourself at least 1 bulky boy. The responsive last ban phase was okay. Pick phase wise for the last few picks were meh. Let's be honest. We see the Azir picked up for Schalke. Obviously, you kind of put yourself in that situation if you're Rogue, where you're picking your top and your mid laner at the same time. It's kind of a bad situation for them, obviously. When you're blind picking Aurelia, it's kind of meh. There was safe options like Aatrox available, who you've got probably one of the strongest lanes, and there isn't too much counterplay to him, so you could have gone with him. Instead, you go for more of a skilled champion like Aurelia, who obviously you're trying a bit more harder to CS, obviously landing them Q resets and all that jazz, whereas that gives Schalke a pretty easy counter pick with a Jax, whom, let's just be honest, he got babysat quite heavily by Sedge on his team. That jungle synergy with his top laner kind of meant that Aurelia did not get to play this game, kind of giving him the Odoamne treatment that G2 gave him when he was going up against a Kalista. And this game honestly felt like no chance was given to Aurelia to actually play. And what I thought they could have done, honestly, was actually, in theory, they could have played Corki top or Aurelia mid. It still would have been decent. Yeah, it's not that best of a matchup into an Azir, but it still would have been better than sending up Aurelia into Jax, who's built to obviously counter it. And the one major flaw in this draft overall for Rogue is there's no real AP threat. All the big bulky meatballs on Schalke had to do was build armor, and what could Rogue do against them? It would have been fairly difficult for him to actually kill any of the big meatballs on Schalke's side, in the late game, and it kind of spelt doom from the beginning for Rogue. And yeah, essentially this game was pretty easy for Rogue to win. And that's going to be it for this episode of Anarchy Analysis. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below. Subscribe if you're new if you want to. And I will see you guys later. Peace out.